Hi everyone, I'm Dave, Director of Cosmia Festival, and welcome to Friday Night with Cosmia Festival and Kirklees Libraries. You're all incredibly welcome at what is one of our last events at our festival this year, and we hope you enjoy the show. We've got two amazing authors tonight to talk about their work and about the business, and for you to find out who we've got and how it's going to work, I'm going to hand over to our wonderful Kirsty from our partners at Kirklees Libraries.
Thank you, Dave. Good evening. And as Dave said, welcome to Cosmia Festival at Kesias Libraries. We've had a fantastic week of events so far during the Cosmia Festival, and I know we're in for an absolute treat this evening as well. This evening's event will introduce you to two authors tonight, Ben Oliver and Kesia Lupo. Ben has a fab biography on the Chicken House website, which I found earlier today. I'm not going to spoil it. I think you should go and have a proper read of it straight live. It's a lovely little story about how he's got the journey into writing. I loved it. So go and read it yourselves on the Chicken House website. As well as being a published author, he's also a high school English teacher. And The Loop, which I'll never point in the right direction, there it is his first novel. Kesia Lupo is Ben's editor. Am I right, Kesia? Is that right?
Yeah,
that's right. He's actually Ben's editor, as well as being an author herself. She's the author of We Are Blood and Thunder and its sequel, We Are Bound by Stars. Great series, and we'll be introducing those to you later on today. So a quick heads up before we meet them both properly. Read Bookshop in Home Fair are offering a 20% discount on both Ben and Kesia's books. I'm going to give you the details of how you get the discount later. There's a code you'll need. So stay on to the end and we'll give you that. Plus, there's also signed book plates by both Kesia and Ben at the bookshop as well. So well worth. I don't want to mention Christmas presents yet, but more of that later. So got lots to discuss and great books to introduce you to. So let's meet Kesia and Ben. So Kesia and Ben, welcome to Kirklees and to the Cosmia Festival. It's lovely to have you both here.
Thanks for having us.
We'll do the little online wave. Thank you. Hi, guys. So if we're happy, we'll dive straight in. We've got some great questions for this evening. The theme for the Cosmia Festival is kind of focusing on, in particular, post-apocalypse novels, which is very fitting at the moment, which we'll come on to a bit later. So I suppose the first question would be, why write a post-apocalypse novel? Is this going to go to Ben first, perhaps, with The Loop?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess my first goal as a writer is to try and entertain. You know, when I sit down to write, I'm not really thinking about the moral message or theme of a book. That all kind of comes later. My first goal is just to write the most entertaining story that I can. I guess the entertainment factor often comes from extreme circumstances, you know, like young people in a death row prison or, you know, zombies attacking or the end of the world. So I think obviously none of this was happening when I wrote the first draft of The Loop. And I just thought, you know, that's a very extreme situation to put a group of young people into. So I think, you know, that's pretty much what I mean. I've always grown up reading and enjoying apocalypse novels and movies and TV shows. So just thought I'd give it a shot myself.
Excellent. Okay. I mean, Kesia, as an editor as well, I mean, obviously, We Are Blood and Thunder in particular is set in a kind of a slightly different one. Although I was thinking earlier when I was reading about the cloud and then the kind of pestilence that follows, there's kind of an element of that kind of living through a kind of, you know, very challenging time. So I think the question can come to yourself as well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Ben. It is first and foremost to entertain. But I think alongside that, the aim of a lot of speculative fiction in general it serves as a kind of mirror to our own world. So for me, reading apocalyptic stories is kind of cozy in the way that horror is really cozy because you feel safe by comparison. But at the same time, you start to see parallels and maybe even through fictions start to think about where our own world is going. So yeah, like you said, neither of my novels are kind of classic end of the world novels in that they're fantasy, but they're both about a kind of end of an era in some way. So an end of a dynasty or a way of life or a type of magic. So for me, apocalypse, it can be zombies or alien invasion, but sometimes it's like smaller and subtler. So both of my novels, I think, kind of ask those same questions that you see in lots of apocalyptic novels about the world we live in, and I guess our own role in potentially, hopefully, saving it.
Oh, I like that. We'll come back onto that later. Absolutely. So I suppose that kind of leads on to then, I mean, you both kind of touched on this, but so as a genre, post-apocalyptic or speculative fiction, so why, as readers, why should we read these novels? Or is there an importance, or is it just, hey, it's an entertaining read, it hasn't happened to us yet, so we can we'll feel a little bit better about our lives? Or is there something else that people might look for in these sorts of novels? Whoever wants to take that.
It's both. And, you know, with Ben's novel, I think, you know, he has obviously drawn on many aspects of our own world to kind of create it. I mean, that's kind of my reading of it anyway. That so you've got, you know, technology and the justice system and all of those things that actually, while it's like this rip-roaring, entertaining read, it's also quite serious in that you can sort of see a route whereby, you know, this could happen to us. I don't know if you agree with that, Ben. Did you actually consciously like do that and draw from our world, or did you just sort of do it naturally as the story came to you?
No, there's definitely drawing from real life and this current situation we're in. I think, like you said earlier, writing fantasy and sci-fi definitely you can draw from the real world. It's all about holding up a mirror to the world. I think in sci-fi it's usually done kind of by looking into the future, whereas fantasy is more allegorical. In the case of The Loop, I was kind of asking myself, what's going to happen? Where's this world going to go if we keep on, you know, electing capitalists, idiots into power over and over again, and keep letting technology grow exponentially and keep it unchecked? And you know, these kind of things go hand in hand. The people we elect into power use technology to influence people to elect them again and keep them in power. So, yeah, I was definitely drawing on kind of real world situations and Cambridge Analytica and you know, the scary people who are in power these days.
Yes, absolutely. You've answered quite a few of my questions that I've got later on, but we might come back round to them and ask them a little bit more detail. That was a good answer. So we've got kind of it as a genre. So with the current pandemic, I mean, you know, everyone that's been writing kind of speculative fiction is either, I think, thinking, oh, I've not been too far off, or I've been way off. Who would have anticipated the shortage of toilet paper? In any novel that anyone's written, you know, that's been the one that's been confusing us all. But so in terms of kind of living through a pandemic, as we all are, has that kind of changed your thinking about how you might write speculative fiction in the future? Or are there elements of what's been happening with us now that you'll never touch with a barge pole because it's just too current, too recent? Or are there things that you think you might be tempted to kind of incorporate into writing in the future? I'd like to go first. Ben, should we go to you first?
Sure. Yeah, I think a lot of writers that I've spoken to recently are saying they really want to steer clear of apocalyptic writing and apocalyptic fiction. And I understand that completely, but I think a lot of my writing, a lot of why I write is to kind of figure out how I feel about something, or to explore something a bit more fully, try and understand it or look at it from different perspectives. So I don't know if anything would have changed. I think I still would have written The Loop if I was starting now. It might look a bit different. In fact, the book 3 that I'm writing right now, the third book in the Loop trilogy, it briefly mentions the 2020 pandemic at one point, and there's a scene where all the characters had to stand 2 meters apart, not because of infection or anything, but it's to steer clear of being spotted by drones. It's a whole thing. But that was obviously on my mind, staying 2 meters apart from everyone. And so I guess, it definitely has affected book 3 of The Loop anyway. But I don't think I'll be steering clear of writing apocalyptic fiction in any way.
No, it's interesting. How about you, Kesia?
It's almost impossible to steer clear of writing apocalyptic fiction, because even if you're writing like a middle grade, like chummy fantasy, it's always something to do with the end of the world or an end of a world. So I think that everyone will still be exploring this subject for years to come, but I can imagine that maybe from an editorial or publishing perspective, people might not want to be reading so much about sort of a pandemic or sort of sickness or pestilence as We Are Blood and Thunder. So yeah, it's interesting. And like Ben, I've also been working on book 3 during this period, or trying to. I probably only started in August, which was about as early as I could motivate myself to even, do anything productive in my free time. But it's definitely darker than the previous 2. It's a very different genre and it's much darker. So I feel like it has had an effect on my therapy in some way.
I think it's to be expected, isn't it? I mean, we spoke to Dave and I spoke to Bren McDibble. I'm still going to keep giving her points for best name ever, Bren McDibble, awesome author of Across the Risen Sea, and she was saying that she's been working before the pandemic happened on a novel which had quite a kind of echo in what happened with Zana Freya, and they were kind of stuck now. What do? Do they go ahead? Do they try and get it published, or do they? It's a difficult one, isn't it? If it's something that you've actually been focusing on before, but that must happen with a lot of, I suppose, circumstances. It could be a war breaking out, it could be a refugee crisis. If it's something that you happen to cover in a book before it happens, then it's that. And I suppose it's from a publishing point of view, that really is quite interesting, isn't it, Kesia? That there'll be a different kind of thinking process that'll go about, because it's about how you market and sell a book to a group, isn't it, as well? So
yeah, it is interesting, and I've seen a slight uptick in books dealing with this pandemic and people living through it, but definitely a downward trend in general sort of pandemic themed fiction. So yeah, people are feeling a little like, yeah, we've had enough of that in the real world.
Do you think,
yeah, I suppose. Yeah. So this. Sorry.
I was going to ask, given the length of time it takes for a book to be written and then marketed and published, that by the time that things are being written now, when it gets to when they're actually published, people might be ready for something that allows them to reflect on the pandemic, or do you think it'll still be too soon?
I think it's so hard to tell. I mean, we're looking at the moment, the pandemic's going to carry on for another year. So in publishing terms, it probably will be next year that we'll be thinking about, say, what's going to come after this, and do we want to be reflecting on it, or do we want to be steering clear of it altogether? But I think it's such a great genre and such a way of kind of looking into almost processing things that we've been through. So I think it's important to carry on writing, carry on thinking about this type of fiction.
Yeah, no, I think that's because there's lots of books which are set in very realistic settings, contemporary realistic settings, aren't they? That I know that a lot of people read, or a lot of people choose not to read, depending on whether they look to reading to help them work through what they're experiencing in their own lives, or if they're looking for escape. I suppose there's always going to be people that use books and reading for different reasons, isn't there? So interesting. Cool. Okay, so I think we touched on this before, right, Ben? But is this sort of fiction, the kind of fiction that you choose to read yourself? Is it where you kind of feel inspired as a writer to find other media as well? Is this something that you seek out or have read for many years?
Yeah. Pretty much as far back as I can remember, I've been drawn to fiction that affects me in a certain way. I mean, I remember reading Goosebumps books when I was really young, and at the same time loving and hating the way they absolutely terrified me when I was maybe 10 years old, and couldn't get to sleep after reading them. And yet, for some reason, the next night I'd be reading more, and I don't know why I did that to myself. So Goosebumps and point horror books early on. And then one day, I remember my friend Dave Nicholson in high school, when I was about 12 or 13, lent me a book called Blood Crazy by Simon Clarke. It's not a very well-known book. It's kind of a cult classic these days, but that was the first end of the world zombie novel I ever read. And basically, ever since that day in high school, I was in the library just about every lunchtime trying to find more of these types of books, and I think that led on to dystopian books and YA books from there, and that's obviously influenced me quite a lot, because that's why I enjoy writing. I've always been drawn to that. As soon as I kind of found that genre, and I don't know why, but it's definitely just kind of hooked into my brain, and I wanted to read more of it ever since.
Yeah, well, that's interesting, isn't it? What about you, Kesia, with fantasy? Is that a genre that you were drawn to read, or is this something that you write rather than read yourself?
No, I read. Well, I've always been into fantasy, but also science fiction and horror and basically anything genre. So the first kind of apocalyptic type books I remember reading were the John Wyndham novels. So these very kind of Day of the Triffids or the Chrysalids, those really my imagination. And the thing I love about the Chrysalids as well is that it starts out in this kind of world that seems historical or almost fantastical in a way, because you just don't realize that it's post-apocalyptic. So I think that kind of bridge between science fiction, historical fiction, fantasy has always sort of fascinated me. And I think that's kind of worked its way through into both of these novels. We Are Blood and Thunder has a very kind of horror undertone with sort of necromancy and dark magic and all of that. And We Are Bound by Stars is kind of more, I don't know, more political, I guess. So it's more of a exploration of like the society that they live in and the types of choices that people make. So in different ways, I think they both draw on all of those different books and movies and kind of themes that I was obsessed with as a teenager.
We've heard that book recommended so many times, haven't we, Kirsty, this week? The Wyndham books. Yes. I think it's a real. We might as well have been sponsored, I think, for the festival by that book. So it's obviously has a broad reach.
Yeah. They're books that leave that mark in your mind, aren't they? There's some ones that do. James Herbert ones I remember reading, Rats, which we'll come on to with Ben's later on. So you both feature young people as the protagonists, and you put your young people through, well, quite a lot. Those that survive and those that don't. So why? I mean, obviously, writing for young people, and young people, your books usually have young adult protagonists. But why, in particular, do you choose to put young people as a protagonist in your novels? Is it because you're writing just for young people, and that's the form, or is there something else that you find that you're able to do with young people as protagonists that you can't do with adults?
Well, I didn't start out writing for young people, actually. I thought I was writing proper, quote unquote, grown-up fantasy books. And this was before I was remotely familiar with children's fiction or YA fiction. And in the first book, my main characters were like 30 and 25 or something. But it just so happened that the more I got into the story, the more it became kind of a growing up story, and it just made sense for them to be younger. And I think there's so much in that all characters kind of have to grow during a novel, but sometimes you just kind of hook on to a particular age, maybe the age that you were when you started conceiving of the story, which was, for me around about 20 or 21. So I was almost, a young adult in that sense. And yeah, that it just kind of came through in the characters and naturally kind of felt younger than I originally thought. Ben, did you have a similar experience? I seem to remember you saying that your original idea wasn't YA as well.
Yeah, way back when the very basics of the idea kind of came to me, I pictured the main character, I didn't have a name at this point, as a sort of older, maybe mid-40s kind of man. And all I knew was that it was going to be a death row prison where inmates were offered basically an extension of life if they took part in scientific and medical experiments. I can't remember at what point it turned into a young adult cast of characters, but I think when I sat down to actually start writing it, because usually an idea will be in my head for at least a year before I start writing it, it sort of like slowly kind of incubates and grows, and then at some point I'm just ready to start writing. And almost as soon as I sat down and started writing it, they were just a young adult kind of cast of characters. And I think that does stem from, when books really meant the most to me, when they really kind of like hooked me. I guess that I was that age. And something about that has just kind of stayed with me. I guess I always say that I'm kind of writing for myself when I was about 14, when I kind of was obsessed with reading all the time. So I guess that's why I write a lot of young adult.
Is that a really interesting idea that you're right when you? I think that's really. I've never heard someone say that before. That they're right for that age, that they would have enjoyed it most. I love that you're. Well, I didn't have that book, but I'd have loved it. Well, I think that's great. That's really. Sorry, Kesia.
I was just wondering, Ben, like the fact that you work with teenagers now, does that also impact on your decision to write for teenagers?
A little bit. It's quite nice. Like I never told my classes that I was getting a book published, but eventually somehow kids always find these things out. And when word got around the school, it was really nice to see how enthusiastic they were about it, and they were buying copies of it and asking me to sign them and things, which was amazing. It was really cool to see and to be a part of. So I don't, Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that, because I don't know. I'm trying to think whether that actually influences my writing in any way. I don't think it does.
Well,
I wish I could say yes.
I'm going to say yes
Oh,
because your dialogue is just so realistic for teens. Like I think it really just comes across as, you know, it's contemporary realistic dialogue in a way that I think someone who doesn't maybe work with teenagers day in day out wouldn't be able to capture. So maybe it's had that kind of, you know, almost subconscious effect.
It probably has.
I was worried, Ben, you were going to say that being a teacher and having a story which was about kids being put in prison was more wish fulfillment than anything else.
Yeah, maybe that's why I started writing it, actually. Maybe that's where the idea came from.
Just the end of a really long day. Oh dear. So actually there's a nice segue here into about how you create your worlds, because both of you have created worlds. I mean, there are elements of both where you can kind of see the kind of lines from where we are now, but how do you go about creating a world? These kind of, I mean, the extraordinary amount of detail. I was just thinking, I've been reading Kesias, and the extraordinary amount of detail that you create in these worlds. And I'm not a writer myself, I'm a reader. I read a lot of books, and it's just one of those things. How do you start world building? I suppose. How do you begin? Do you maps? Do you build?
Yeah, I mean, actually, for me, maps. I started this novel probably about 7 years ago now, when I was working in London, and I would have this long commute from my flat into my job, and I would just sit on the train and like basically draw really bad maps. I'm terrible at art, but bad maps, lists of names. Like ideas about the religions of this place, and like, you know, just the history of it, and like, you know, 90% of it never made it into the book. But I think for fantasy, at least, it's just really important to have that you know, that backstory in your head, so that you can always draw on it if you need it, and you just have that. I'm sort of overwhelmed by how much people like George R.R. Martin must have in their heads at any one time, you know, that the history of every character and like all of the different places. But I guess for me it was the same, but on a very much smaller, simpler scale, that you have to kind of populate this place. And yeah, I just felt like from that original really simple creative exercises that the whole story just kind of grew. The world building was almost like the easiest bit, and then the story was really, really tough. I'm the kind of person who can just write pages of descriptions and like, you know, nothing happens, but people are thinking lots of profound thoughts, but nothing happens.
I like that. How about yourself, Ben? World building.
Yeah, almost the opposite. I just I've never plotted anything in my life, really. I always say that I'm maybe 1 or 2 pages ahead of myself when I'm writing, and that's about as far as I know. And then sometimes a detail further on in the story will pop into my head, and I'm sort of aiming for that. But no, it's always for me been like almost transcribing the movie that's playing in my head, if you know what I mean. It's like I just kind of picture it and then write down what I see. And you know, sometimes I'll just throw in a detail like Kesia was saying about religion. There's like something called the Church of the Last Religion, like in the background of the Loop and the Loop trilogy, and dropping that in book 1 kind of forced me to bring it back in book 2 and then make something of it in book 3. So world building, sometimes I almost like set challenges for myself. I'll put something here and somehow I have to tie this back in later on, and that seems to work for me better than like, I just never been able to plot. I don't know why. Sitting down and trying to write something out doesn't work for me. I have to get straight into the writing process, which often means I'll write 10,000 words and then scrap it all and start again, because I just either started too early in the story or at the wrong point, or I just haven't got something right. Sometimes I'll start 2 or 3 times and I'll have written almost 50,000 words before I even have anything at the start of a book at all, which can be annoying, but it's just, I guess it's just how I work, how I write.
Yeah, I have a lot of wastage as well, so not just you.
To keep these very carefully so you can use them for something else later on. Yeah, we have to do the books, the companion books next to the series. That's what you want to keep those for, don't you? There you are. So you both, the names that you use in the books are also really interesting. Some of them are kind of very so Luke, like names we have now, but some of them are just, I how do you come up with the names? Do you spend ages just putting different words together? How do you come up with the names?
Well, with We Are Bound by Stars, it was really easy for me because so my husband is from Sicily, and the book is based on a sort of fantasy version of Sicily. And I just basically plundered his entire family and bits of my family. I also am a quarter Italian. So it was just kind of really easy. I just had all of these names floating about and sort of fantasized a bit of them, if that makes sense, like just kind of made them a little bit different. But with the first book, I think they're all pretty much like standard traditional names that have been tweaked. So like, I guess the weirdest ones are like Emrys, which is just sort of made up, but Lena is like Elena, and Constance is just a name. So that I think it's really good fun to kind of go through that process of like, you know, who are these characters? They never just pop into my mind fully formed. It's all the process of like, what's the right name for this character, which is really fun.
It blows my mind really. I would struggle terribly. I struggle to name a report, never mind a whole character in it. What about you, Ben?
Yeah, sometimes the name will just pop into my head, and sometimes it's a bizarre made-up name, like Panda was just she was just Panda, and that was it from the start. Blue was just Blue, but sometimes I will spend ages searching through like baby names and stuff on websites with like thousands of names, and it can be a bit of a block for me because until I get the name right, I struggle to continue writing. I don't know why. I wish that wasn't the case, because sometimes I really want to write, but I'm like, I can't get any further until I know this character's name.
Yeah,
so I don't know why. That's something that's always been, until I know their name, I can't write them properly. Yeah, and like I said, sometimes again with like Malachi was just Malachi, Luca was always Luca, but some characters, it didn't just pop into my head, and it always frustrates me when the name doesn't pop into my head straight away, because I know that I'm going to be scrolling through these names for hours trying to find the right one. Yeah, that's just how it works for me.
That's really interesting. All right, okay. So research then. So we've got baby books names and plundering family names. So when you come to, because there's quite a lot of detail in both your books that felt quite real. So even though there were other worlds, there was quite a lot. I mean, there's a lot of science in your book, Ben, which kind of made sense, and you're kind of thinking, oh yeah, that sounds like I could see that path, I could see that path being taken. So in terms of research about kind of about the world that you're creating, did you do any extra, or is it all just out of your own heads? In which case, all praise to you, because extraordinary amount of detail. So you, Ben, what about the kind of tech and things that you were describing? All sounded very plausible to me.
Some of it's kind of some of it's based on stuff that is happening like now, but just, you know, asking myself, what's that going to look like, you know, however long, 20, 100 years from now, what's that technology going to evolve into? And things like the rich part of society in my book have access to like pre-birth cosmetic editing to make themselves look beautiful, and they have things like mechanical hearts and lungs just to extend their life. And these are the things that come out of the experiments on the prisoners. So, but all of the technology kind of comes from, if I didn't already have some knowledge of it, then I did do some research on like the latest in weapons technology, the latest in nanotech, the latest in medical technology, and where that might lead. But it's quite minor research, really. It's just a quick search to like, what do we have now? And I kind of ask myself, and that's kind of the fun part, is being able to extrapolate from what we have now and think, hey, what might that look like down the road? And some of it's just completely made up, and I just think that's part of the fun of writing sci-fi.
Sounds so plausible. I'll tell you what, I'm looking at people very carefully now. How about yourself, Kesia?
I did a history degree, and I feel like that is my main source of kind of inspiration or what I can plunder most easily in terms of research. None of the stuff in any of the books is in any way historical. However, I think it's just a really great starting point. So I didn't really have to do research as such, but I think just reading all these stories of like dynasties and how they fall, and like, you know, revolutions, and I don't know, I guess especially in book 2, there's a bit more research involved, because I've kind of involved elements of Sicilian culture, such as puppet shows, and sort of Venetian culture, there's a sort of mask element to the story. So there's mask makers. One of the main characters is a mask maker. So I had to do some research into how masks are made, and although they are magical, so I kind of like fluffed it a little bit. So it's always a mixture of like Ben said, it's nothing intense. It's just like a quick Google search, and then like, oh, what can I take from that? Which is, yeah, really, really fun. But it's in no way, I would never say that it's a well-researched books. They're very much my imagination just sort of smushed together and, yeah, mixed around.
Sometimes you shouldn't ask questions, should you? I was just, absolutely, I thought this is, oh yeah, brilliant, wonderful, very funny. So should we have a quick break from questions? Would one of you like to do one of your readings that you have prepared for us? It'd be great. We'll have a little break from questions and have one of you do your readings. Who wants to go first?
Either way.
I've
got my page marked already.
Hey, there you go. Thank you very much.
So I'm going to read from very near the beginning, so you don't need to know too much, except Livio, our main character, is going into a kind of Fight Club style fight. I drop into a low, prepared stance. The Raven does the same. He's wearing a pair of loose fisherman's trews tied with a belt and nothing else. Close up, I can see his torso is crisscrossed with pale scars. The world narrows to me and him. We're alone in this shining light, in our own bright and tiny world, circling each other on the head of a needle. I can't even hear the crowd anymore, can't even see the shapes of those watching as anything more distinct than fish in dark water. But then I glimpse the cloaked figure, at the front of the crowd now, a few paces away. Why don't they show their face? I feel a coldness on my skin prickling into goosebumps. I notice something I hadn't noticed from a distance, a gold pendant hanging around the figure's neck, flashing as it catches the light, a flaming sun on a long chain. I frown. What's the matter, boy? The Raven growls. Scared? I wipe the frown from my brow, forcing myself to focus. But I don't reply. I found it's best not to talk in a fight. Silence is more unnerving for your opponent. He lunges towards me. He's quick, but I'm ready, and I duck under his fist. It's a test, really. He's figuring out what I'm capable of. I stick out my foot as he retreats, a move that's worked well in the past, but he doesn't trip. I clench my fist tighter. This isn't going to be easy, but I'm glad. There's no fun without a challenge. I duck another 2 blows, then send my own fist up towards his chin. He's gone, and out of nowhere, I feel his knuckles connect to my skin. I stagger away, somehow creeping ungracefully out of the reach of another blow aimed at my head. Damn, he's good. I see an opening and ram my shoulder into his gut, hear a satisfying oof of pain. I try to trip him, pull his leg out from beneath him with a jerk of my hands, but he recovers, and I change tack last minute, aiming a punch at his jaw, which, to my surprise, actually connects. He's dazed, staggering. I haven't been listening to the crowd, haven't even been aware of them since we started fighting, but a shrill scream pierces through at exactly the moment I'm raising my fist again, pressing my advantage, and panic floods me, freezing my muscles. My arm drops. The air has changed. Excitement has shifted subtly but surely towards fear. Some people are watching us, but others are glancing over their shoulders. There's something else too, something other. I can feel it. I think of the cloaked figure. Where are they? They were right there at the front, and now they've disappeared. What's happening? A punch in my face. My nose makes a deafening crack and time slows as blood splashes onto the sand. It's broken. I can tell by how it feels, loose and wet like a sodden rag. The Raven's on me, pushing me down, my mouth in the dust, my entire face throbbing with pain. Old Jacobo should be over us, counting down to his win, but instead there are more screams than I see a nearby lamp being extinguished by an unnatural swirl of sand, as if the desert is rising up to reclaim what man has stolen. No one's watching us now, and I feel the Raven's weight lift from me as he too finally realizes there's something more important happening here.
Oh, lovely. Thank you. Absolutely. Brilliant. Oh, who wants to look now? Yes. That's great. Thank you. kind of, and we have a little ... at moment. Ben, can we have your bit now as well? I love that you were reading to me. It's just the best part of an evening for me. Do you mind having yours now? Would that be okay?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'm just going to read from the start of the loop. So, day 736 in the loop. The harvest begins, and all that exists is fear. This is how it goes every night at the same time. Minutes pass, or maybe hours. It's hard to tell. But at some point, I begin to hallucinate. My mind recoils from the pain and the panic, and I'm no longer in my cell. I'm standing on the roof of the Black Road Vertical, the kilometre-high tower block where I used to live. The boy with the blonde hair is screaming. He's trying to pull a weapon from his pocket as he steps backwards towards the edge of the building. And the girl in the witch mask is getting too close. If I don't do something, he'll kill her. Stay back, he screams, his voice cracking in his rage and dread. One last tug, and he frees the pistol from his pocket. He takes another step back, increasing the distance between him and the girl in the mask, and then he aims the gun at her head. My eyes snap open as the harvest ends, and I'm left completely drained on the hard concrete floor of my tiny grey cell. My heart beats so loud and so fast I can hear it echoing off the walls of the clear glass tube that surrounds me and reaches from the ceiling to the floor. I try to brace myself for what comes next. Try to hold my breath, but there's no time. The cold water falls from the ceiling so relentlessly and so powerfully that I'm sure I'll suffocate. My lungs are on fire as the tube begins to fill with the chemical-laced water. My exhausted body begs me to suck in oxygen, but if I do, I'll drown. After what feels like 100 years, the grate opens below me and I'm sucked to the floor. The water drains away and I'm left choking and gasping for air. My breaths come out in ragged coughs as I lie naked at the bottom of the tube. The heated air comes next, a blast of constant wind that's so hot it's on the very edge of burning my bare skin. Once I'm dry, the air stops and the tube lifts, disappearing back into the ceiling for another day. For the longest time, all I can do is lie still on the cold floor. In the loop, this is the closest thing we get to a shower, a government-approved waterboarding. Soon it will be time for the rain. Every night, despite the pain of the energy harvest, I force myself to stay awake and watch the rain. It comes at midnight, half an hour after harvest ends, and it falls like a monsoon for 30 minutes.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Wonderful. Wonderful. So we're all sitting listening, or just we're there. Those first few chapters are just, when you're trying to, as a reader, trying to see and find your way, are just absolutely, and because they're so short as well, you just it's very, very page turn at the beginning there. Absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it. Okay, thank you very much, both of you, for that. So as writers, we have a great writing tradition in Kirklees, and we do a lot of work around aspiring young people in particular, and inspiring young people to write and to use writing as an outlet for dealing with things that they're going through as well. So do you have any recommendations or tips or anything that you might suggest for aspiring young writers out there about how they can develop their own writing skills? Any ideas or things that have worked for you?
Yeah, I mean, thinking back to when I started writing, which was probably in my early teens as well, I think the most important thing is just to sit down and start writing. Like, it doesn't really matter what you're writing at first, just see where it takes you. You know, you could be starting with a character or a place, just describing a character or a place that feels important to you, or you could start with something happening. But the main thing is that you make a start. And I think that, you know, you never know where that start is going to take you until you try. So just try and start with anything and just keep going. And as long as you're not necessarily writing for anyone, you're writing for yourself, but that could lead to writing for other people. You know, the more you practice, the better you get, as with anything.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. How about yourself, Ben?
I completely agree with what Kesia said there. Yeah, just start. Sometimes that's the hardest part, is just looking at a blank page and start. And another thing I would say is, don't worry about things like getting the punctuation or spelling or anything like that correct. I completely failed everything in high school, including English. I don't know. I just even go to my exams because I knew I couldn't pass any of them. But I always had stories in my head and creativity. And if I didn't just sit down and start writing them, regardless of whether I could spell properly or punctuate properly, I would never got to like this stage. And you kind of learn when you enjoy what you're doing, when you enjoy the writing, you'll slowly learn what all the little punctuation marks, speech marks, and things do. And the more you read, you'll learn that. You'll pick it up as well. So I would also say, don't worry about, whether you're good at English or good at writing. If you have a story in your head that you want to get out, just sit down and write it, and don't worry about things like punctuation, because it's really all about the story in the end. Punctuation and spelling can be fixed. If you're good at writing, if you have a creative mind and you want an outlet for that creativity, write regardless of whether you know how to.
Brilliant. And you mentioned very briefly there about reading. Do you think that trying to read as much as possible to try to get influences, or to try and be inspired by the writers, or to kind of gain that, is that something again that you might recommend, or that worked for you or works for you?
Yeah, I think you have to have a love of reading if you're serious about being a writer. I don't think you can be great at anything unless you love that thing, if you know what I mean. I think if you're not drawn to reading books, then you're probably not going to be a novelist or a writer in that sense. I mean, if you love movies, you should write movies or act. If you love, if you love art, you should draw or paint. If you love reading, you should try and write. So yeah, I think reading is really important, and I kind of don't think you can be a writer unless you love books. I think it's or if it's graphic novels, then you have to love graphic novels. If it's comics, you have to love comics. I think you have to love what you do to really achieve anything in it, and to want to continue to achieve something in it.
Yeah, and I think for reluctant readers or people who've been perhaps late starters as readers, not to be put off by that, because that doesn't mean that you won't find that passion in the future. So it's just about finding the right books for you. So I would say, it's true that you need to have a love of reading in order to write, but don't give up on reading just yet, and don't kind of feel like there's nothing out there for you. Just keep trying to find books that speak to you.
Yeah, that's a very good library. We like that answer from the library service. Absolutely fantastic. Yes, that's our whole premise of how we open our doors. Wonderful answers. Thank you. I'm going to flip a little bit here, just back to kind of the themes of the books. And let's, Dave, jump in if you've got any questions here, Dave.
Yeah, I will.
Thank you. So I was just going to say that both of you deal with, and again, this might be me seeing things in the stories that aren't there, but it's both of the books. So in your book, Kesia, there's quite a lot about people of difference and how they're treated, or people that are perceived to be different and how they're treated. In your books, about like with the mark on Lena's face and how she's treated, and then when she goes to oh my goodness me, the bad place where it's full of magic, and they treat her differently because they see her as a rogue and all this sort of thing. So I think it's quite interesting, and kind of with where we are at the moment in the world with refugees and asylum seekers and borders being placed in front of things. That's quite interesting to see whether or not that is actually what you intended, or if it's your concerns in the modern world have nothing whatsoever to do with what you put into your book, and it's just what I've taken out because of what I'm seeing in the modern world. And I suppose it's the same kind of question for yourself, Ben, that do you see things that, like you mentioned, some of the, how tech's being used and exploited? Is it a concern that you see nowadays that you're putting into your books as something that you're wanting to kind of explore? Is that how you've used your writing? You can go with that.
Yeah, I definitely intend to reflect that in the world, and to kind of explore that a little bit. I feel like I could have explored it more even, but I wanted to show that this was a world that was imperfect in different ways from ours. So it's not a particularly sexist world. It's not particularly racist, actually. Like, there's a very diverse cast, and I don't really try to explore that at all, but I wanted to show that there are still issues. And hopefully by the end of the book, you can see that they're starting to see that attitude is wrong, and that this idea of people who are marked out as different, which in the book is in this particular city is seen as if you have some kind of a disability or a difference, or perhaps you had an accident which has changed you completely. then you are sent to look after the ancestors who are kind of the dead in the crypt beneath the city. And I think by the end, you see them finally kind of realizing that these are people, that they're people with dreams and hopes and fears just like the rest of us, and they start to come out of the crypts, and that's kind of ending on a note of mild hope, hopefully. And it's kind of similar in book 2, where we have different types of magic and the prejudices that come with that, and 3 sisters, triplet sisters, who have been marked out by birth to do a particular job, but they don't want that. They are searching for something different. So I think in both novels, it was a case of, showing that even in fantasy worlds, there are these prejudices and restrictions, and that characters, are not willing to be bound by those. And hopefully that's a kind of inspiring message.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, that's great. How about yourself, Ben?
Yeah, I've definitely purposefully put elements in my book that I see in the real world. Like I said, I always start off with the idea of writing an entertaining story, and it always starts with, a situation like young people in a death row prison. But these themes do start to kind of like reveal themselves as I write. And I realized, looking back over everything I've written, from like manuscripts I wrote a long time ago to ideas I have for future books, the same kind of things keep coming up in my writing. The same themes keep coming up. So clearly these things get to me on a subconscious level, because I just keep writing about them. About like class divides and the riches taking over the poor, and how the people at the top of the ladder want to saw the rungs off below them so we can't get up there, and taking opportunities away from people. These things keep coming up in my writing. So, and it is the things I see in the real world. So that's definitely something that I incorporate into my writings, things that I see in the real world and issues that get to me, especially like class divides and the rich wanting to hoard all their resources and wealth. And just clearly this gets to be on some subconscious level, and I keep writing about it over and over again.
Well, yeah, it's again, it's a way of people working through and being kind of even if you're not intending to have people thinking or inspiring people to thought, and just think about entertaining, I think it still has those consequences, because you just kind of rub it in your head. You think, well, that's very light now, isn't it? Very light now. I think, and the rats, the rats in the tunnel. That's someone that uses a lot of trains. Honestly, you got to read the book, people. Those rats. If you don't like rats, just bear with. So, Kesia, did you have questions that you wanted to ask Ben? Did you mention that? Did you still questions? I
mean, I kind of managed to filter them into the conversation. But I was going to ask whether, so Ben, as your editor, obviously, I know that you are an exceptionally good self-editor. I've observed that you're actually really more than usually open to making kind of big changes in your work. So I just wondered whether that was something conscious, or if there was anything about your writing experience in the past that had informed that kind of open and flexible attitude.
I don't think there's anything in my past. I've always written on my own. I've never been part of a writing group or anything, and so I've never really had much feedback on my writing, other than a few people every now and then. But I very much just kind of like write on my own and don't let anyone see it until I'm ready to. But I think when it comes to like being open to making big changes, it really comes down to like, well, you guys and everyone at Chicken House, the ideas are so good. Why wouldn't I incorporate them? I don't know. I think collaboration is a very important part of writing. Something I didn't really know until I got deep into like the publication process is how many people actually have an input on it, and there's everything from like your agent, your editor, proofreaders, copy editor, everyone like will see it. And most of the big changes obviously made quite early on, but yeah, the ideas are all just so good that it's almost like there are certain things that the ending to the book is completely different to the original first draft, and that came out of a conversation that me and you had, Kesia, about like, you know, just like a what if conversation. What if this element was introduced? And it was just, I love having those conversations because it just kind of things start sparking in my head, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I've got something for that. So like, I'll be writing down notes while we're talking because, yeah, I think that collaborative part of writing is really exciting, and it can just like unlock certain doors in your mind that you didn't even know were there, let alone locked. So yeah, I enjoy that process.
How does it work for you, Kesia, as an editor and a writer? Do you find yourself trying to ignore what an editor might say, or you're always writing thinking, oh, they're going to pull me up on this, or I know I need to fix that?
There's a little bit of that. I think my biggest issue is that I'm constantly second guessing my editor. Kind of, what does she really mean here? Like, what's the subtext? And I really need to stop doing that and just take everything at face value. It's all fine. But I actually really love being edited. I think it is actually really refreshing for me because I feel like I managed to somehow flip a switch in my head and be on the other side of it. And it makes me feel kind of relaxed about the whole writing thing because you're suddenly like, there's someone on my side, like there's someone helping me and they know what they're talking about. But then I just sort of remember, but I'm that person for some other writer. So it's kind of crazy, but really interesting and really fun to be edited.
Because not often you hear that.
I was actually going to ask you, Kesia, if you, like, as an editor, like, people might assume that you enjoy like second draft and rewriting more than the actual first draft, but is there a part you enjoy more than the other?
I hate writing first draft. So,
oh really?
Yeah, that kind of goes through. Yeah, they're just always so bad, and I always feel so ashamed of them. And then I usually find that as I go through the process, probably the first edit I find the most enjoyable because you're just like ripping it apart and just like, oh, this is terrible. I'm going to make it better, and I know what I'm doing at this point. And then the more you go on that process, the more tired you get. I don't know how you feel about copy edits, but by the time I get to that very last stage where they're just basically correcting grammar and being really pedantic, it's, their job and what they're supposed to do, but also by that point you're just exhausted with the whole thing. So yeah, it's kind of half and half. I think the first edit I find really satisfying.
How interesting, isn't that? I've never heard that before. That's so satisfying. And I work with a lot of writers groups, and I think they find that bit because a lot of the groups around us, they use each other as a kind of a first sounding board in particular, and I think they find that excruciating sometimes, even when it's done with love and done with care. But yes, I'm very excited about your first edit. That was very interesting. Wonderful. I like the process part. Wonderful. And I have to say, I haven't got actual copy. I had an ebook copy of yours, Kesia, but I don't know who designed this book. This is the most one of those tactile books to actually read. I don't know what it is, what it's made of, and why it's different to other books, but it's very tactile. It leads you astray. You think, oh, this is a nice, touchy-feely book.
It's called Super Matte, so look out for them. It's Super Matte.
Very so I'd highly recommend getting this book. I say, Kesia, I've had yours on ebooks, so I'm sure yours are equally tactile, I'm sure. But yeah, something. I'm like, what am I holding here? Anyway, sorry. So that's the thing. Yes. No, it's a very good. I love covers. I know we're not supposed to judge books by covers, but I do, and I think your covers are. I've just realised actual books. You've got the lights in front of, isn't it? Behind you, Kesia, is that right?
Oh yeah,
all books with it. Yes, it is. I've just realised from the colours what they are.
Yeah, slightly shiny. They've got lots of.
There we go.
There's the original one. Signed as well. Signed first edition.
It's all who you know, you see, or who edits you. But I always think that illustration, even though it's just in the front of the book, is really important. So do you get much? How much say, or how much do you get in? And within yours, I think the thing that I liked as well was this bit as well, that we had the kind of that loopy kind of thing as well. How much say do you get in kind of the design of the books then as authors? Or is that taken out of your hands by the publishers?
Well, you kind of get
You go.
you kind of get like shown the design, and I think if you had any real issues with it, they would take that on board and they would kind of take it back to the designers. But I'm lucky enough to never have had any issues with with the cover designs, the 2 cover designs I've had so far. I just think they've been, as soon as I saw them, I loved them. So I've never been in a situation where I've not liked it, not liked the cover design. So I don't really know. And all like you said, all the into the design inside with like the chapter headings and things, I loved all that straight away. So I don't really know. I mean, Kesia, you may have had clients in the past who've not liked the covers. I don't know. This is something that I've not really had to deal with.
You're lucky, I think, that there are quite a lot of authors who, I think it's just the fact that, you have such a solid image of your book in your head and what you expect it to look like, that a lot of the time when you see the cover, you're like, oh, that's not what I thought it was going to look like. And so you're disappointed. I personally liked the first version of We Are Blood and Thunder, and I like these even better. Like, so they're just sort of a bit more sort of classic. But that first version I liked. I didn't think it worked so well for them. I think the sort of movie poster, having the characters on the front cover kind of thing, is a little bit controversial. Like lots of people don't like having characters on the front cover. So there was lots to talk about with that, and kind of a lot of back and forth, but it wasn't really me bringing up objections. Like, I was always just happy for them to, talk about it amongst themselves and decide what they thought would work best. But yeah, I mean, I think it's more of a consultation with covers. You're asked your opinion, but at the end of the day, it's the publisher's decision.
It's a different experience, isn't it? What was that? I suppose as well with characters being drawn by someone else, that must be a. I always think this when someone works with an illustrator, that must be quite a moment, isn't it? When someone else draws a character that you've been in your head, I imagine is quite visual. That must be a bit of startling as well. I think sometimes that if they're far off or they're very close to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, Ben. I never necessarily visualize my characters really, really clearly. I don't have like a face in mind. They're just sort of, I guess, blurry, or just, I don't know. I didn't really have that kind of vision. So actually, when I saw the front cover of We Are Blood and Thunder, that is now what I think the characters look like. It kind of affected me. So I imagine it's similar if your book is sort of translated into film or TV. Like, you probably take on some of that expectation of what people are seeing.
Yeah, not the same as you, Kesia. I don't have a crystal clear image of any of my characters in my head. I have like same as you, like a blurry kind of outline of what they look like. And yeah, I can't remember who. I think it was Ian Rankin was saying. Another writer told him, "Don't ever watch the TV version of your work, because you'll never be able to picture the original character you had in your head again." But I don't think if the loop ever became like a TV show or movie, I don't think that would be an issue for me, because I don't have that, like you said, crystal clear image of exactly what Luca looks like, or anyone in the book looks like. It's all kind of shadowy, blurry.
And it has in fact been optioned for TV. So
I was about to ask. Oh, very interesting, because I could see it very much, the rats.
Perfect.
But apart from that,
you're traumatized, aren't you?
I am. It was Mabel. Mabel going into the tunnel. Anyway, read the book, people. Read the book. Oh, it has been optioned. Excellent. So that'll be an interesting experience then, if it goes through, and how people cast and everything. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, it's very exciting. It'd be. And I'll definitely watch it. I won't take the advice of not watching. I'll definitely watch it.
Absolutely. I want to see what someone else brings to it. Excellent.
Yeah.
I think it would make an absolutely stonking good film. I think it's got that kind of element to it, but you could see it. It's very visual. Brilliant. So, 1 minute 2. Very good. So unless there's anything else, Dave, any questions that you're sitting there quietly?
Where can people buy these books from, Kirsty? That's my
it's funny you mention that, Dave. It's almost like we set that up. We're getting toward the end of the festival, people. So if after hearing, and I haven't got a copy of Kesias, Kesias sitting behind her there. E-copies are no good for online. There we are. So if you're interested in buying copies of Ben and Kesia's books, You can get them from Read, the bookshop in Home Firth. It's just right next to the library if you're in Home Firth, want to go and buy it. If you can't get to Home Firth, if you either email them at read.homefirth@gmail.com, read.homefirth@gmail.com, or you can catch them on social media at read_homefirth. And you'll need, if you just have a chat with them about how you can get hold of the book, and then you've got 2 separate discount codes. If you're after the discount code for Ben's books, you need Ben's book rather. You need the discount code of CFBEN20. That's CFBEN20. Can't work out the code there. CFBEN20. And you get 20% off. And if you want a signed book plate, they've got those until stocks run out. And then for Kesia's books, it's CFLUPO20. CFLUPO20. That's the 2 discount codes. If you didn't get a catch of that, this is all recorded, so you can go back onto YouTube or Facebook and go and fast forward through this bit and get the codes again at the end. And then I've just got a reminder, because I think that's awesome. It's a great thing that we're getting offered. So even though we can't meet you in person, we still can get your books signed by distance. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. So that's our friends at Read, bookshop in Home Firth. Make sure you go and get copies, because we thoroughly recommend you read these books. You're going to absolutely love them. I'm not quite finished one of Kesias, so I'm just wanting to finish off this so I can just get back to my reading, to be honest. Just to finish off. And I think we've talked around it, so it's not ruined it at all. It's brilliant. Thank you very much for that. No spoilers here. No spoilers here. Brilliant. So I think that's it for this evening. Thank you both very much. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Kesia.
Thank you.
We absolutely recommend these books, people. It's been a really interesting conversation. So if you want to go and read the book and then come back and watch the interview again, and then make even more sense, I recommend doing that. But we've had a great evening. Thank you very much for you both coming to visit us in Kirklees for the Cosmia Festival.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. And best of luck. And we're looking forward to, so your next book's out next year, that right, Ben? The sequel to May
2021, yeah.
2021. And then you've got, I can see in the back of the book, it tells you when everything's due out, so we can hold it to it. And then the next one's the year after, is that right? She says.
Right.
2022, it says in the book, so it must be right. And Kesia, your last book is due out. When's that going to be due out, do you think?
It'll be 2022. I'm not sure what month yet, but I've got a bit of a rest now.
We'll catch up on the first one. We're just ready, nicely ready. If you just space them out a bit, you'll be nicely ready for the last book. Wonderful. So thank you very much, both of you. We'll let you go and enjoy the rest of your evenings. I'm going to just put on a little video to sign this out, and we can all say goodbye. So thank you all for watching. Please do recommend this show to some friends, and if you think they might enjoy the book, go down to Read and get a copy for them with a signed book plate and your 20% discount. Thank you all, and there's still more. I should have said there's still more Cosmia events coming up. We've got Nikki Singer. I forgot. Almost going to let you go there. Nikki Singer tomorrow afternoon, and SM Wilson on Sunday evening. Dystopian Dinosaurs. I'm saying nothing more. Right. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Good evening.